is Charlie Chavijan. Thank you so much for joining from wherever you are. We are so excited today to have Jamie Finn with us and just to be able to learn from her, her experiences, her expertise. And so we are just excited about this conversation again. EMA nationally serves very vulnerable demographic of moms who are living at near below the poverty line, and moms who might be at risk of losing their child in foster care, and many moms who do have a child in foster care and are working really hard to be reunified. And so we want to focus on that demographic today of for those moms who have lost a child into the foster care system, or for those moms who are actively working to be reunified. How do we change the narrative around the way we serve her and the way we serve her really redemptively? There's a paradigm shift that has to happen in all of our hearts and minds and souls in order for us to do that and to do that really well. And that is what Jamie is here to talk to us about in her own experiences, what the solutions have looked like for her, both locally and in her community in New Jersey, and then also nationally with the work that she's pioneering. So welcome, Jamie. Just a quick bio on her. She is the author of her best-selling book, Foster the Family. She's the founder and executive director of Foster the Family, the host of the Real Mom podcast, founder and owner of Goods and Better, and a sought-after speaker for retreats, conferences, events for foster and adoptive parents. Her very popular social media account, if you don't follow her, please do, offers a glimpse into the real life of a foster parent and provides encouragement to thousands of foster and adoptive parents around the country. So at any given moment, Jamie is a mother to 5 or 6 children, including her 2 biological children and 3 adopted through foster care. She lives in Sicklerville, New Jersey with her husband, Alan. Jamie, thank you so much for being here. I want to give you the floor first and just let you share with us just your brief story. How did you get called into your life's work? Why do you do what you do?
Sure. I'm so happy to be here with you. I love the work of EMA, and it really is the heartbeat behind my personal work as a foster parent, and even what I am seeking to lead sort of the foster care community that I'm involved in into a perspective shift in the way that we talk about family and the way that we talk about biological parents, the way that we support them, and really changing the narrative that foster care is not just about welcoming a child into your home, but really stepping into the stories of families. So even though we're kind of coming at it from different spaces, we're really partnering in our vision there. And so I'm just really excited to be a part of this, and I'm grateful for the invitation. So
Awesome.
I have been a foster parent for a little over 9 years. And I came into foster care, I think, the way that a lot of foster parents do, specifically maybe even Christian foster parents, with this idea of, I want to care for the widow and the orphan and the fatherless, and a lot of the words that we use that I think are helpful because it's where we see God's call for us to step into these spaces, but they're misnomers because right away, as we're approaching foster care, we're calling these children fatherless, we're calling them orphans, and we are sort of mentally ignoring the fact that they have these parents attached to them. So I came in very much like, I want to open my home, bring me all the kids, I get to save them, I get to change their lives and finally show them what love means. And I really came in with a lot of ignorance and arrogance that God has been really kind to break away those pieces that were a part of my thinking and even some of my interactions with my kids' parents and workers at the beginning. And as I learned, I really just felt compelled to be sharing what I had learned, because I didn't want to come into foster care with the wrong perspective. Yet I didn't have anyone sharing. I didn't have anyone from the pulpit teaching me this. I didn't have examples in my life. And so I felt just this conviction of I want to be that for someone. I want to be able to share what a redemptive, restorative perspective of foster parenting can really look like.
Mhm.
And so I started sharing about my life on the internet, and that led to me speaking in other spaces to foster and adoptive parents and those involved in the system, writing the book, and practically serving foster families in my community, which has expanded beyond that to other places in the country.
Yeah.
So that's my quick little synopsis.
Yeah, we could spend a lot more talking about it, but and I think part of the reason your voice caught like wildfire is because it is a shared it's a shared experience of so many families that have stepped into the foster and adoptive space that it's incredibly raw and vulnerable for you to even lead by saying like, look, I got it wrong when I started.
Mm,
My husband and I share in that story where we had this idea entering into
right.
foster care that it was like save the babies,
Hmm.
and we were wrong. And God, yes, he's like good and gracious and breaking us down of those beliefs. But I think the cool part about the church and like for us in our faith-based communities is you do see a tide shifting, where I think the reason people have responded so much to your message and your work is because they share in it. They share in that same grief, they share in those same mistakes, and everybody is just seeking the longer term, most redemptive
Hmm.
solution for, hey, wait, what was God's plan A here?
Sure. Right.
And how can we advocate for that? Um, Tell us a little bit, like go deeper with us on your first experience with maybe, I believe it was the first child that you brought into your home. How did your relationship with that child's birth mom change your perspective?
Yeah, it was my first child, and it was a real paradigm shift for me because I don't always share this detailed, but because we're in a really intimate space and we all are coming from the same heart, I'll share a little bit more.
Mhm.
She came into my home and she was removed for deplorable housing,
Mhm.
which to me seemed like a very simple fix. Like, okay, just clean your house and then you could get your
Right.
kid back. And so this should just go really quickly. And as we know, it's never one single thing. Most of our kids' parents are really coming from their own story of trauma, their
Mm.
own broken families. And we see so much intergenerational trauma and addiction. And so it was not as simple as
Yeah.
clean your house and you get your child back. So I started to learn more about her story, and it was all the things. There was
Mhm.
abuse in her childhood, there was mental illness in her family, suicide of one of her parents, addiction, and it changed my perspective completely from why aren't you doing this one thing? If you
Mm.
truly loved your child, you would just do this thing to, oh, there is a whole person with a whole story of
Yeah.
pain and things that have changed her brain and biology and her beliefs about herself and her children. And
Mm.
really understanding that, and then also comparing it to my story, which couldn't possibly be more different, of two-parent Christian household, no one ever touched me in anything but love,
Right.
just this very strong foundation. And I'm sure that some of the people on this call and the people that I share this message with, their stories often mirror more
Mm.
my daughter's mom. And that can be the case. And even then, I think we can easily come with a, well, I was able to do it, so why aren't you able to do it? But I think
Yeah.
that God's word would speak to all of us, any of us who are able to have the resilience and the strength to be able to show up for our kids the way we do, that it is only the grace of God that
Mm.
we are what we are. And what do you have that you have not received? So when
Mhm.
we see it from that perspective of what do I have that I've not received, we go from a, why are you like this, to a, oh God, it is only your mercy that
Mhm.
I am able to parent from a place of health, and that I've had all these resources and support system. And it shifts from arrogance to
Mhm.
humility, and it
Yeah.
shifts from judgment to mercy and compassion. And so getting to know my daughter's story was sort of the first step on that paradigm shift for me. And once I was on that journey, it pushed me closer in relationship with my kids' parents, which
Mhm.
just built more understanding and more compassion. And the deeper I got in relationship, the deeper I understood all of the factors that they were really wrestling through, and how many things were stacked up against them, and how many things internally needed healing and
Yeah.
change. So it was understanding her story that got me there. And then it's been continuing to lean into the stories of my kids' parents that has continued to teach me and train my heart there.
Yeah. And take us a step further in terms of just like the laying the theological
Mm,
foundation of how we engage in relationship with people that we might not share experiences with.
yeah.
We may or may not even understand. It's super easy to slip into this state of judgment and I could do better. I could be better.
Yeah.
And it becomes more of this like spiritual versus material poverty.
Mm,
And what does that look like when we're engaging in relationships? So what are some things you've learned, and you started to touch on it, but unpack that a little bit more for us on like the theological foundation for family
yeah.
and what does that look like?
Yeah, I that's a great question, because I think if we're left with simply what we see, we could
Mhm.
build a case for the fact that we could do a better job, and that these kids would be better off somewhere else with more stability and health and material things. And if that is all we see, it's very logical to think kids should be removed and placed in better families, and you could easily get to that place.
Mm.
And so I think the theological foundation, and there is also a really strong research-based foundation of how kids do with families, but we'll just put that aside now and assume that that's the case.
Yeah.
I think the theological foundation, first of all, it starts just with the beautiful, really rich model of what the
Mm.
family represents about our God.
Mm.
So we have two pictures really clearly in scripture. One is Christ and his church being the bride, that family, that unit of oneness, of covenant love.
Mm.
And then just the Father and the Son, the very image that we see that God gives us of himself and is true within the Trinity, is
Yeah.
just Father and Son. Family is built into who God is. And then he creates a family, and there's clear direction immediately once the family is created, of what it should look like, of how it should play out. And that continues throughout scripture. He speaks to the family with the assumption that the family is
Mhm.
going to be together.
Mhm.
In scripture, it is very clear directions of mothers to their children and fathers to their children and children to their parents and husband and wife to each other. And God created this perfect,
Mhm.
beautiful model of what the family is supposed to be. So, what we experience as those in this space, and even just humans in a broken world, is that sin has
Mhm.
messed those things up. And that's the reality we live in. This broken world has been touched by sin and trauma.
Yeah.
And so that our reality is not that perfect model of the family. But when we start with the belief that the family is sacred to God
Mm.
because it is inherent in his oneness in the Trinity, it's inherent in his relationship with us, we look at it and we say, oh, this thing is worth protecting. It is
Mhm.
worth fighting for because it is created by him to be something special. Then, when we see the direction of how the family is supposed to operate, we see that Jesus, when he came to heal everything that sin broke and touched, that part of that is going to be the family. So
Yeah.
Jesus came to heal what sin had broken, to make whole and to bring life and to redeem and restore. So logic kind of needs to go out the window of,
Yeah.
well, we should just start over here, or we should think of what practically is best. We look at God's heart for brokenness, and it
Mhm.
is healing, restoration, redemption. And so as his followers, when we see broken things, our heartbeat should follow Jesus's mission, which is
Yeah.
redemption, restoration, healing.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. I remember when we were fostering, I have a really similar story to you, Jamie, and our first experience in fostering, God just broke our hearts for the birth mom.
Mm,
And we fostered two little boys and they had different dads. And so at one point, the father side of the little brother, they stepped forward and they were working this reunification plan. And they were a little bit of an older couple. They had adopted his dad. And so they lived in one of the poorest streets in our
mm,
county. Uh, very, very, very poor. And I remember feeling that like fight of, oh, we could provide such a better
mm,
life
mhm.
for blank. And we went to the courtroom that day and the couple showed up and we didn't know these people. And
Sure.
the couple showed up and we walked into the courtroom and the judge sat there and said, "Why should we consider moving this child into your home?" And the granddad stood up and was like, "We just believe he deserves a chance to know his family."
Mm,
And we were dead wrong. I mean, these
mm,
people were he was a bivocational pastor. They
mm,
love Jesus. Like, yes, they are poor, like materially poor, but really, really rich in spirit. And it was really good for me to know like that doesn't matter.
mm,
Most like these kids and their bonds and how God has designed them innately to like be connected to this family and to your point, represent that wholeness and completeness was like God's original design.
mhm.
And like to have that moment of I'm wrong in this is was really critical for me. And then also just seeing like in the end, I like to think a lot about, and I've shared this with our team, what does this work look like in heaven? Like I love
Yeah,
thinking about work being our worship. And
yeah,
one day, like this work can be really grueling and
sure,
exhausting.
sure.
And so we ask ourselves the question of like, what does work look like in the next life? And God gave me this vision a while ago that was a mom and a child sitting there playing, and up walked the dad. And he sat with them and they were playing. And don't come at me with, we're not gonna be married in heaven. But like it was a vision of wholeness and
Mhm,
completeness where God
mhm.
is like, when he talks about finishing the work he starts,
Yeah.
that's what he means. And that we get like when we're bringing heaven to earth, that's what we get to be a part of. And so, yes, like understanding that foundation, that theological foundation of family, um, is so critical. How has it changed your thinking in working towards restoration with families? How has that framework changed your thinking?
Well, I think one thing is it's removed from me the idea of comparing who would be better for this child.
Mm,
Instead of coming with my resume and all I can offer and look at my home and my husband and you're a single mom in this, studio apartment and you work all the time and they're going to be in daycare.
right.
I can do this like, well, this is all she would get from me. This is
Mm,
what he would get from you and sort of compare. And it removes that right away. I mean, when
mhm,
I'm talking to foster parents, I sometimes joke like, you wouldn't date a married man. And it just shuts down
mhm,
that thinking of like, this child is not, the question here isn't for me, who should they be with? The
right.
question is, how can I step into this story and offer with a heart that really seeks to follow God's heart for them,
Mm,
offer support and resources. And so I think that at the beginning, I spent a lot of my time as a foster parent in my mind comparing what I could offer,
right.
and even sometimes with workers and the judge, like you just said, showing up at court.
Mhm.
I'm ready to give my argument for why they should be with me.
Mhm.
It was too much energy into proving why they weren't who they were supposed to be. And that is gone for me now. What it is
Mhm.
now is, okay, maybe I really do see this. Maybe there really is something here. How can I serve? How can I provide resources? How can I bring support? And no effort wasted on trying to build a case mentally or to others of why they're
Mm.
not enough. But
Mhm.
seeing, okay, I can come with this redemptive, restorative perspective of how can I serve
Mm.
to accomplish what I am praying will happen here.
Yeah. Yeah, and our community is filled with volunteer advocates. So these are women that are trained and equipped and assigned a mom in
Mm.
crisis.
Mhm.
Many have a mom in foster or have a child in foster care.
Mhm.
And so they are that assigned like emotional, relational, tangible support to walk this journey out, this crisis journey out with mom, moving her towards a place of stability. What would you say to the advocate who you're like in that turmoil and that almost feels like the cyclical effect of, but I don't feel like she's ready to
Right.
get her child back? Like what does redemption look like in that process
Yeah.
of mom isn't ready
Yeah.
or even mom may never be ready? How
Yep.
do we still advocate for mom as a woman, as a child
That's
of God
good.
in that?
That's good. Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, I've adopted 3 kids out of foster care, and I have testified against parents
Mm,
in court before. I have advocated against reunification before. So I am very aware of how this is not like a black and white, and that
mhm,
we have limited sort of control. Even though I do think there's a lot of research about how our beliefs actually correlate to the likelihood of reunification.
wow.
There's really compelling research of just the way that foster parents, and I think that this could probably extend similarly to the work that you're doing. There are strong correlations between the way that we believe about reunification and our kids' parents and the likelihood of reunification happening.
Mhm,
But while we can be really limited in what we are able to do and make happen, I
mhm,
think that the heart of of how are we approaching this
mhm,
um, makes a huge difference. And so sometimes redemption in a child's story means adoption.
mm,
Sometimes redemption for a mom even means termination of parental rights. And
mhm.
that is the sort of confusing thing of being in a broken world, seeking to bring God's kingdom to earth as it is in
Mhm.
heaven, and knowing that that's not going to happen until heaven. And
Mm,
so we're like fighting for what Jesus came to do. That is what we're looking to join. It's his mission of restoration and redemption.
mm,
But until all things are made new, there are going to be ways that we see God bringing redemption and bringing healing to something that is broken, that is not brought back to the original of what
yeah.
it was. There's this art form we often talk about in these spaces, kintsugi, where a broken pottery is mended with gold and becomes more valuable. And
Mhm,
so I think part of it is believing for the moms that while they love their children, there might be a place where redemption and restoration actually looks like their children having another earthly forever family.
mm,
And what we could do, what you all could do as their advocates and people who love them, is giving them vision for what it looks like to still be a parent,
yeah.
even when they're not doing the day-to-day of parenting, what it looks like to love and be available for their kids. I think one thing is our foster and adoptive parents, we're just learning more and more how much our kids need their biological parents. And there
Mm,
really is a movement of those of us who are seeking to speak this to foster and adoptive parents. And so I think that we're seeing more openness to adoptive parents really walking with their kids back into relationship with first parents. Well, as ready as first parents can be for that, the better these kids are. So if
Yeah.
they are understanding adoption as redemptive and restorative, if they are focusing on their physical healing and mental emotional healing, then they are still living and loving as a parent. They
Mhm.
are doing what they need to do for their child, even if there's a part of broken relationship there.
Mhm.
So I think that we can, it's not about putting our heads in the sand. It's not about saying God wants this family to be together. We are sure of that. And so we are going to make this happen. We
Mhm.
all have a commitment to protect vulnerable children. What it is okay, in this broken space, until all things are made new, how
Right.
can I be a part still of there being healing and restoration?
Yeah. Do you think it's fair to say, because many a times too, when we as advocates, myself included, get the assignment of the mom, we are privileged to read their files.
Mm.
And so you read the report as a foster parent as well. You read the whole report, and it's so easy to jump to
Yeah,
conclusions and be
sure.
like, this mom is not fit.
Right.
Is it fair to say we should enter into those relationships with mom with a blank slate
Mm.
and like learn, because oftentimes then what happens is you sit down with mom and you kind of hear her struggles and that cascading effect of one thing that
Yeah.
leads to another. Now she's here, and this here space feels really confusing and daunting, and like but if you trace it back, oftentimes it all started with an unpaid electric bill that just
Mhm.
became this like problems interlocked, is what
Mhm.
we talk a lot about when we work with families in poverty. And so how do you enter into relationship with moms? Like what is some of your best learned approaches in like starting with a clean slate, believing in the best, because that's felt in
Yeah, sure.
relationship. If you're going to be a
Yep.
skeptic of me
Right.
and question what I'm sharing, then that's going to create some tension in our relationship. So what are some of the approaches that you've learned in building relationship with birth moms?
That's good. Yeah, I love just the question about coming with a blank slate. And I think we can even come with even a little more than a blank slate, like a
Mm,
ready slate, because we know that God's heart is even especially for the vulnerable.
yeah.
Like it's not, God loves everyone. And we see that he has special provision and calls himself like father to the fatherless and protector of widow. Like
Mm,
he really cares in even a special way. And so I think we can come with even an extra level of compassion and readiness to just um, humbly listen and care.
yeah.
But what I try to do is treat my child's mom like they are the expert on their child.
Mm,
And the same way, I hate to compare foster care to babysitting, but the same way, if I was babysitting someone's child, I would want to
sure.
know, tell me about your child. What do they like? What do they love? What makes them feel safe? And
Mm,
I'm automatically changing the dynamic between I am the superior parent, I am the expert, I am the one brought in to fix this situation, to sort of giving them the upper hand of
yeah.
tell me about your child and how would you like me to do this and how should I. And so that's specific to me as a foster parent, but I think there could be applications there of not coming in as if you are the one with the answers,
Mhm,
but coming in as the one with the questions. What is
mhm.
this like? And just asking a lot and listening a lot. Um, Believing, like you said, a lot of it is in our belief and our disposition that we're not approaching with this saviorism, with
Mhm.
this arrogance, but really listening and asking questions and seeking to believe the best.
Yeah.
Really, in New Jersey, we don't have access to the file. And
Mm.
that's something that I've always been really grateful for is I'm not coming in with the baggage. And so when I meet
Wow.
mom, I'm just like, tell me your story. let me
Yeah.
listen. And I'm asking questions that hopefully don't feel like I'm interrogating or attacking, but I've often experienced that they are just happy to share themselves with me, because what I'm asking for is their story. I
Mm,
just want to be involved in who they are as a person, and not the how did you get here? Why did you do this? But just like, tell me about your parents. And it often gives me a perspective that really builds compassion and empathy.
yeah.
Because most of the moms that you're interacting with, I'm sure, have trauma histories themselves,
Yeah.
and a lot of experience of broken family and broken relationships themselves. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, when we talk a lot about trauma and the effects it has on children when
mm,
they're removed. And I think that's a whole nother workshop for another day because that's a lot of packed information in there. But could you shed some light on for us, like, yes, the child certainly experiences trauma when they're removed from their caregiver, most oftentimes their mom. What type of trauma does the mom experience in
mm,
the pulling away of their child into the
mm.
system?
Yeah, sure. So we also have to remember that our attachment styles, our brains are formed at the very beginning of our lives. And so there could probably be a big difference between me with a secure attachment and a healthy brain and body,
Mm,
and me incurring trauma, and the way someone who has experienced trauma their whole lives, that
mm,
I have a regulated nervous system and an integrated brain. And so when something challenging happens, I have the resources, and my body knows how to go into, oh, this is scary. And I know how to re-regulate. I know how
that's
to
good.
experience healing. A lot of our kids' parents don't have that foundation in and of itself. So when you're living in a place of fear state, when you're living in a place of fight or flight,
Yeah.
or survival already, and then something devastating happens, it
Mhm.
there is not the sort of built-in neural pathways of, here's how we experience regulation again, here's how we find a place of healing. It's, my life is a pattern of chaos, and this
Yeah.
is another part of that. And so it's often trauma on trauma on trauma,
Yeah.
and really can be a trigger when there has already been loss and trauma in their story, when they've experienced potentially the foster care system themselves. I mean, I often share with foster parents, we know when we're foster parents who are entering this because we love kids and families, who we
Mhm.
are and what our heart is. Our kids' parents most likely have an experience of foster care before this. They
Mm,
either experienced it in their life or their family or their community in a way that a lot of us, like middle class women who are jumping
mhm,
into this, we don't have a frame of reference already. So their understanding of what foster care is may be inherently dangerous and
mhm.
scary, a place where they were hurt or they were betrayed. So there's the trauma of that as well, of how it could trigger things in their story as they experienced foster care before. So those are just a couple of ways. I,
Yeah.
we could talk about this for hours and
Yeah.
hours, because it is the deepest, most primal relationship. It is
Mhm.
body relationship. It is brains connecting in a way that we don't see in other relationships. And so it is deeply traumatic for a mom,
Yeah.
not even to get at the shame and
Yeah.
the fear and some of the just normal emotions of what they're walking through.
Yeah. And whether it's a mom that's already lost her child into foster care or has an open investigation and is at
Mm,
risk, or is pregnant and has formerly lost her child into foster care, that all of those things can feel really scary
yeah.
and very triggering. And then she enters into, say, an EMA program and gets paired to an advocate where now you're entering into the space. And for us to have like really deep understanding of all of the things that she's experiencing.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about like, how do we build connection, like meaningful connection with mom? And we talk a lot about how it has a lot to do with consistency and
Mm.
showing up. Would you add anything to that conversation on building meaningful relationship with someone that is experiencing all those fears and traumas after maybe having just had their child removed, or some of the other examples that I shared?
Yeah, I love what you said about consistency, and I think that that makes sense to us, and it's also a brain-based approach to it, which is that we want to build felt safety. And so us saying, "I'm here for you," most likely means nothing. And us
Mm,
showing up and actually being there for them, there is an a wholeness of their bodies and brains experiencing our presence and feeling
mhm,
safe with us. So I think that is a great approach. I think one understanding that was important to me was just with boundaries and
mhm,
the way that we can kind of throw around like, oh, mom has no boundaries, or she's just crossing all these boundaries, and really coming to know most of these women probably have not experienced healthy boundaries before. And then we throw them into a situation like your advocates or as a foster parent where we're saying, I want to support you. But there's no
mhm,
line. It's very confusing of what that means. And we have expectations of how we want to walk with them. But
mhm.
their relationships most likely have looked very different from ours throughout their life. And
Sure.
so to have the assumption that they would just know that calling 7 times in one night is inappropriate or whatever it might be, that boundaries are a loving way to actually help their brains and bodies feel safe because they know
Yeah.
where the line is. It's a way to maintain healthy relationship with them. It's a kindness for
Mhm,
us to be able to say, hey, here is what I expect of our relationship. Here's what I can offer. Here's what, and really lay it out and not sort of hold them to this invisible line of
mhm,
where the boundary should be. But we create the line, we hold it in kindness and love as a way to protect ourselves
mhm,
as we're in this really heavy work, and as a way to help them feel safe in the relationship of this is what I can expect and bring to this space.
mhm, mhm. And doing that early and
Yes.
often.
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, like reminders are helpful, and because backtracking is hard and weird and can like create stress or fractures in the relationship versus
Right.
just coming out of the gate with that. That's good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Talk to us about, if we're serving a mom that has a child in foster care, how do we
Mhm.
encourage her to sort of co-parent with foster
Mm,
family? And even a lot of the moms we serve have a child in court mandated placement, but maybe it's a relative or non-relative.
sure.
And they're the enemy now
Yep.
because they're just the ones that are like trying to be the protector of the child, and mom might be experiencing a host of things. And so
Mhm.
how do we help moms rewrite and kind of reframe their thinking of what their relationship almost in this season of co-parenting looks like? How can we
That's
encourage
really
moms with that?
good. That's good. Let me say this, sort of just in this small context. I think it's important to say that there are many foster parents, too many foster parents, who do not have a redemptive, restorative perspective on
Mm,
foster care. And they really are entering foster care to build their families.
mhm,
And they really are coming with maybe at best, sort of the arrogance and ignorance that we both confess we came into. And at worst, are coming in potentially with a um, I am ready to
mhm,
judge and I'm looking to bring this child into my family. And so I think we need to be a little bit sensitive to that and know that it doesn't always play
that's
out the
good.
way that we think it should with foster parents. But I
Mhm,
think one thing that's helpful is to really encourage them to keep it about the children, especially in the context of family relationships, where it can be really complicated. And one way to do that is to ask a lot of questions that hopefully lead them to the conclusion of what's best for their child,
Yeah.
so that the child doesn't become sort of like a pawn in a relational conflict with a family member. Is things like, well, what do you think kiddo would like to do for their birthday? What do you think? And just sort of leading
Yeah.
them to hopefully coming to the place of doing what's best for the child without the complicated relational dynamics between their other family members or the foster parents.
Mhm.
Because if we're all doing that, the hope is that we come to the same conclusion, that
Mhm.
these kids are better off being with both sets of parents who love them on their birthday, that these kids are better off not being in a push and pull dynamic of what they're allowed to do one place and what they're not allowed to do another. And so our questions leading them to answer for themselves what's going to
Mhm.
be in the best interest of the child,
Mhm.
and sort of ignoring the more complicated relational dynamics with the adults.
Mhm. Yeah, and it can become so just messy.
Yeah.
And what would you say to an advocate of like, is it responsible to at times almost play that liaison between mom and maybe foster parents, maybe the other
Mm.
family members, like the more parties that we can get to the table and have clear understanding of expectations and needs, the better? Or at times, is it appropriate that there is space between?
I mean, my answer to that would be that the more people who are at the table who are trauma informed and have a perspective of restoration and redemption, the
Mm,
better. What can be challenging is not everyone is coming to the table in that way. And
yeah.
so I love how you are building this culture in your volunteers and your advocates. And so my assumption would be that the presence of the people who are listening to conversations like this are most likely going to make things better, and
Mm,
that offering that, even just as a I'm on your side. What
yeah.
we need to remember is a lot of times our kids' moms are vilified.
Mhm,
And even in these family dynamics, it's the whole family versus mom.
mhm,
It is the whole court system versus mom. And just being the person who is like there for them and they're on
mm,
their side. So when I'm joining a family team meeting or coming to court, it's like, I'm here for you. I'm here with
yeah.
you. And not even, well, the goal would sort of be neutrality and to help mediate that, for her to feel like I have a person here with me and
Mhm,
they want what's best for me. Even just that them feeling like you have their back could help
mhm,
potentially be less defensive.
yeah. And advocates, I think us serving as a party that can color in some of the details for people that
Mm,
are making decisions based on this family. A lot of the caseworkers that we work with, we we like are so grateful for their service in this space. We believe that they love people. That's why they got into this work, and they're totally overworked and
yeah,
overwhelmed. So how do we like make their job easier and also just provide clarity and details around, wait, that's actually not what happened. Like,
right,
here's what
right,
happened and why
sure,
mom didn't get to that appointment, not just because she was being lazy or negligent, but
right, sure,
whatever led up to that. And that we get to not just be a voice, but give mom a voice and be that person that's going to fight for that and really owning the brokenness in that space and in our city. So
that's
um,
good.
last question, Jamie, and then we'll jump into some of the Q&A for the last 10 minutes is we ask anyone we bring on the workshop to just say, hey, what's one piece of advice you would give to an advocate, to someone that's working hand in hand with a mom that has a
Mm.
child in foster care? What's one piece of advice that you would give to them?
I would remind you of the verse to renew your mind,
Mm,
that there are going to be a lot of things that are going to bring your mind into what you see, which is brokenness and questions and a lot of details that can make things look scary or impossible. Or we need to be renewing our minds to the why of why we're doing this, of what we believe about family, of what we believe the gospel can do, what we believe
Good.
about restoration. And that will help us not to become jaded in our perspectives. It'll help us to stay aligned to God's heart for these
Mhm.
women and for their families. But that is going to be, we're called to renew because things become old very quickly and
Mm.
easily. And so assuming that your thinking is going to become old, that it's going to be pulled into the natural, hopeless realm, and we have to fight to renew and really apply what we believe about
Yeah.
God, about the family, about these women.
That's so good. I feel like that was targeted at me.
It's targeted me too.
I received that. That's so good, Jamie. Thank you so much for
Oh,
joining us
yeah.
today. We so just appreciate learning from your voice and experiences. It's really valuable. So thank you.
Of course. I'm so happy.
Okay. First question is from Kristen. Is there anything you have seen that a mom needs that you as the foster parent couldn't offer, but someone
Mm,
else, like an EMA advocate, could? That's a great
mm.
question.
That
And
is a
if
good
so, what was
question.
it?
Yeah. I am always seeking to support mom, to sort of enter their family story here. But my primary focus has to be my child. And so that means that a lot of my attention of pursuing their health and wellness and all of that is
Mhm.
um, is going to take a lot of my time. And so for me, the big thing is advocating for connecting them to resources in the community. As
Mm.
a foster parent, I'm sure you probably have policies on this, like we can't give money, things like
Mhm.
that, but we can connect them to all of the different support systems that exist to help them. And so that for me has looked like getting on the phone with lots of people, sort of being the well-spoken, put together person to come in and look
Mm.
at the apartment with them. And people, I think, can sadly take them more seriously when we are standing with them,
Mhm.
helping navigate some of these situations. So that is my heart as a foster parent, but my time is limited because I'm also really just focusing on this child.
Mhm.
So I don't know that there's anything practically except that you would just have more time and focus. Where my heart might be there, I'm going to be limited in how I can do that.
Mhm. Do you think, and this is not an email plug, but do you think honestly, if the biological moms that you have worked with in the past had someone like an EMA advocate, like
Yeah.
how would that have changed your experience as a foster parent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they would be doing a lot of what I'm doing that I don't have time to do, that I
Yeah,
don't get support in doing. And that's really complicated because I have 5 or 6 kids in my home.
sure.
So I think it would probably just be a lot of how I think foster care should function for
Mm,
foster parents, but that we simply don't have the time. I mean, I
mhm.
would, gosh, email plug all you want, because I would love if my kids' moms had an advocate for them, because
Yeah,
I end up stepping into that position of being their advocate.
yeah,
And it's I don't think it's a conflicting role because it's always for the best interest of the child, but it certainly pulls my time and
yeah,
focus and energy. So
yeah. And in some ways, I do, Jamie, think you're a little bit of you're unique. And that's a lot to ask of people that are already
exactly.
like opening their homes for
Exactly.
these
It really
children.
is.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
now you're supposed to like do all these things with mom and
Right.
to create more partnerships. But yeah, just like being really specific on roles, I think is important.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, Lindy said, are there a few favorite phrases you've seen be impactful to communicating dignity and support to mom? This could be a
Mm,
simple way to equip our advocates as they cheer on mom. Are there a few favorite phrases?
that's good. Lindy wants scripts. And I think,
This is angled.
yeah, exactly. Scripts, I think, are really helpful because it's like mantras. We speak to our hearts and we speak to them. So one thing I say is one thing I'm always affirming is your child needs you. Your child needs
Mm,
you. And just wanting them to know that, like, just a million times, that's coming into their mind and heart, and wanting them to know that I believe that I am not like, they're better off with me. And really speaking that into not just their hearts, but also their brains and bodies. So
mm,
I think knowing knowing the woman that you're working with and knowing the lies that she has been really tempted to believe that have become her scripts, and
mm.
giving a truth to that. So
That's
if it's
so
like
good.
nothing will ever change, if that's what you just keep hearing her say, like nothing's ever going to change here. Okay, then what's the reverse script there? Like what's the lie? What's the truth that we can put onto that lie?
Mhm.
And speaking that as a script. I mean, the beauty of scripts is that it's not just truth for your heart, it makes it easier for your brain to go there. So
Mhm.
when you're hearing them say nothing's ever going to change, no, this can change. This can change. Like something
That's so
that
good.
simple of putting a truth on the lies that they're believing.
The follow-up question to that is, uh, anything you would recommend avoid what would you
Mm,
avoid asking or saying or mentioning to avoid triggering mom as
mm.
we advocate and partner with her to meet goals?
Yeah, that's
Kind of
good.
the lie.
Sure. One thing as that I would often share with foster parents is that we don't want to talk about termination. We don't want to talk about adoption. We aren't trying to bring them back into a fear state
Mm,
of this is what could happen if you don't. We're talking sort of the positive side of that. So it's not if you don't do this, they're going to, it's we need to do this so that you can. And
mm,
so really just helping them go to the why and not being motivated by fear
yeah.
of if I don't.
Yeah. That is so good. It's because you get really attached and
Mm,
connected to their story and you want to see them be successful. And yet they need to achieve those things and process in their own time and in their own way. And it's going to be different than the way that we process or make decisions. And
yeah.
that has to be okay. So
Yeah.
okay, I think that's it for questions. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us again. We hope to have you back. I think there's so much more here that we could dive in with you on, and we just really value your time and attention. So thank you.
Well, I love what you all are doing. I love the fact that there are a bunch of volunteers on here who are jumping into stories with these women. And so any sort of encouragement and insight I can provide, it's just a gift to be able to share it because like I said, we're on the same mission. We're just sort of
Mm,
coming at it from different ways. And so just hear my well done and my gratitude to be able to be a part of this. So
awesome. All right, you guys, thanks for joining in the almost end of your week. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and we will see you next month. Bye.
bye-bye.